It started with silence. Not the comfortable kind, the one that couples share when words aren't needed. This was the kind that crawled under your skin and whispered, "Something's wrong." The kind of silence that made Ilya's instincts snap to attention, like a smoke alarm going off in a room with no fire, but the smell of something burning just beneath the surface. He was sitting in their apartment, scrolling absent-mindedly through a work email when his gaze shifted to his wife's phone, left carelessly on the kitchen counter, locked but buzzing, again and again. One notification in particular caught his eye, a calendar event named Team Strategy Session with a location tagged the Apex Grand Hotel at 8:17 p.m. on a Wednesday. Ilya's expression didn't change. He just stood up, calmly walked to his own phone, and pulled up the app he'd quietly installed 2 weeks ago. A discreet little tracker, triggered not by suspicion, but by intuition. The location dot was there, glowing red, pulsing softly like a heartbeat. Apex Grand Hotel? His jaw tightened, but his hands remained steady. No raised voices, no late-night accusations. That wasn't Ilya's style. Instead, he changed into a crisp, dark shirt, ran a hand through his short-cropped hair, and booked a room 1 floor below hers. If the walls didn't tell him the truth, room service would. By the time he arrived, the lobby glimmered with too much polish and too little soul. That kind of place. Businessmen with secrets, women with smiles that meant too many things. It was the kind of hotel where discretion wasn't a service, it was a currency. He checked in without fanfare, no carry-on, no questions, just a single USB drive tucked inside the breast pocket of his blazer next to the crisp edge of the divorce papers. As he stepped into the elevator, his reflection in the mirrored wall stared back, composed, calculating every inch the man Victoria had underestimated. The elevator dinged. He stepped out, glanced at the hallway numbers, and paused. There it was, Suite 1403. From behind the closed door, muffled voices echoed. Laughter, then silence, then the faint clink of glass. He allowed himself a single breath. Then, casually, as though ordering a nightcap, Ilya picked up the room phone in his suite and dialed room service. "Yes," he said, voice smooth. "Champagne, strawberries, and a personalized card. Oh, to room 1403. The message? For the unforgettable night you've earned. Love, Ilya." Clicked. The hook was set. Now he waited. Room 1402 smelled faintly of lemon-scented disinfectant and something more sterile, like truths too clean to be lies. Ilya leaned against the wall that connected his suite to room 1403, the one behind which his wife and her lover were currently toasting their betrayal. He tilted his head slightly. Muffled voices? Her laugh, unmistakable and too sweet. Then a man's voice, low and confident, arrogant. He didn't need to guess. That was Dmitry Sergeyevich, her boss, married to his career, divorced from ethics. Ilya's phone buzzed. Room service ETA 4 minutes. He smiled without mirth. Earlier that day, Ilya had spent hours collecting his arsenal, digital and otherwise. He'd printed screenshots from Victoria's cloud-synced chat backups, pulled booking receipts from their joint banking account, cross-checked timestamps with geolocation logs he'd compiled silently over the past month. He wasn't paranoid. He was precise. The USB drive in his pocket, full of their conversations, voice messages, photos, a short video, just enough to be undeniable and just legal enough to be admissible. He didn't need to scream. He had receipts. He reached for his blazer and removed a slim leather folder. Divorce papers, signed by him but left blank for her. The signature line waited patiently like a final judgment. A soft knock at his door broke the tension. Room service. He opened it to find a young bellhop trying too hard to look unfazed. On the tray, a bottle of Dom Perignon, 2 crystal flutes, and a platter of strawberries drizzled with dark chocolate. Pure romantic cliché, which was exactly the point. Ilya's voice was calm. "Deliver it next door. Say it's a surprise from a very loyal admirer." The bellhop gave a confused smile but nodded. As he knocked on the adjacent door, Ilya stepped out into the hallway. As expected, the door creaked open. Victoria appeared first, a silk robe clutched carelessly over what was likely a borrowed seduction. Her eyes widened at the tray, the champagne, her lips curled into a puzzled smile. Then she turned her head slightly toward the man inside. I didn't order anything, she said, her voice full of staged innocence. Oh, the bellhop stammered, pointing at the card. But the note, before the rest of the sentence could land, Ilya stepped forward into view, was from me. The door froze mid-set. Victoria's face turned from playful confusion to stunned horror in a breath. Behind her, Dmitri appeared, shirt unbuttoned, confidence slipping like sweat off his temples. Ilya's voice was cool, unhurried. Don't let me interrupt, I just came to deliver dessert. And these... He slid the divorce papers onto the serving tray, followed by the flash drive. With his other hand, he dropped a small envelope. Hotel receipts, printed geolocation logs, and a single image. Her in this very hallway last Tuesday, lips locked with Dmitri. Silence thudded through the hallway. I believe this is where someone usually says, it's not what it looks like, Ilya mused. Victoria opened her mouth. Nothing came out. Dmitri tried. Listen, we can talk about this. No need to... Ilya cut him off with a glance. Oh, I want to talk, just not with you. His gaze landed back on Victoria. You always said you wanted something spontaneous. Champagne in a hotel suite, a surprise at your door, here it is. He turned to leave, but paused, just for a beat. Oh, and I'd stay dressed if I were you. Room 1404 has a very clear view. And with that, he walked away, letting the door creak shut behind him, the sound echoing like a gavel in a courtroom. Room 1403 had turned cold. Not physically. The temperature was still set to a comfortable 22 degrees, but emotionally it was now sub-zero. Victoria stood barefoot on the plush carpet, robes slipping off one shoulder. Dmitri hovered behind her like a schoolboy caught cheating during an exam. The room service tray stood forgotten, champagne unopened, the strawberries slowly bleeding into the linen napkin. Across from them, Ilya took his time. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't throw a punch. That would have been too easy, too crude. No. Ilya preferred something far more devastating: clarity. Brutal, ice-edged, slow-burning clarity. He walked toward the coffee table, dropped a slim silver laptop, and clicked it open. A folder labeled Victoria Transparency Update sat on the desktop. He double-clicked it. Photos appeared, grainy screenshots of late-night messages, cropped images of hotel confirmations, and one particularly damning clip of Victoria whispering into her phone, "He still suspects nothing." Her voice, her face, her lie. Dmitri made the first move. Classic power instinct. You do realize this is illegal, right? You can't just... Ilya turned his gaze on him, quiet and lethal. I can, and I did. You'd be amazed what someone learns when they stop believing the people they love and start listening to logic. Victoria stepped forward, arms crossed, but her posture betrayed her. She was crumbling from within. You spied on me? That's sick. Ilya's brow lifted slightly. And cheating on your husband with your boss is what? Enlightened feminism? She winced. No, let's not reframe this, Ilya continued, circling slowly. You weren't empowering yourself. You were angling for a promotion, a corner office with a view, and someone else's husband between your sheets. You don't know what it's like, she snapped suddenly, being with someone who's always one step ahead. You calculate everything. You never lose your cool. You never even yell. It's like arguing with an algorithm. Ilya stopped, genuinely amused. So, you wanted me to scream at you? Smash a vase? Cry? She hesitated. He leaned closer. You wanted mess, and you got it. Only, it's organized. Dmitri made another attempt to speak. Look, Victoria and I, this wasn't meant to hurt you. No, Ilya interrupted. It was meant to benefit you. She strokes your ego, and you dangle a promotion in return. That's not romance, Dmitri. That's corporate prostitution without a contract. Dmitri's nostrils flared. And let's talk contracts, Ilya said, pulling a document from his coat pocket. A non-disclosure agreement signed by Victoria 6 years ago when she became partial shareholder in one of Ilya's digital ventures. You forgot about this, didn't you? Her face drained of color. This NDA bars you from sharing confidential marital or financial information for 5 years post-divorce, which means if you told anyone about my assets, the lawsuit you'll be facing will make your little affair look like a tea party. Victoria swayed slightly. You planned all this? No, Ilya replied. You planned it. I just adapted faster. Silence dropped like a curtain. Then Ilya softened. Just a notch. His voice dropped to something quiet and human. You know the worst part, Vika? I didn't stop loving you the moment I found out. I stopped loving you the moment I realized you were proud of it. She looked away. You never confessed, he said. You never cried, never came to me torn up with guilt. No. You smiled, laughed, slept next to me like everything was fine. You let me kiss you with the same mouth you used to lie. Victoria's eyes welled up, but he wasn't finished. He picked up the divorce papers, placed them gently in front of her. Sign them. Ilya, please. No, we're past the plea deal phase. He pointed to the USB still sitting on the tray. That contains everything. Copies are already with my lawyer, my accountant, and a journalist I play poker with in case you get creative. I could say you forged it all, she said, voice breaking. You could, but you won't, because you know me better than that. You know I play the long game. Finally, he walked to the door. Where are you going? Dmitri blurted, almost indignant. To do something neither of you have the guts to do, Ilya said, pausing in the doorway. Start over. Alone. Clean. He glanced back once, not at Victoria, not at Dmitri, but at the tray of untouched strawberries. By the way, he added ordered dessert, but I canceled the cake. He stepped out, pulling the door shut behind him, leaving them in the echo of their own shame. In the hallway, Ilya didn't smile. He just breathed. For the first time in months, it felt like oxygen. The cold night air bit gently at Ilya's skin as he stepped outside the Apex Grand Hotel. It wasn't the sting of winter, it was the kind that reminded you you'd just stepped out of something suffocating. The lights of the city shimmered in the distance, blinking like they knew secrets too. And tonight, the city had witnessed one more mask fall. He pulled his phone from his coat pocket and dialed. The voice on the other end answered before the second ring. Proceed, Ilya said. No greeting, no preamble. Understood, replied the voice, his attorney, Maxim Kolsnikov, a man as sharp as a scalpel and twice as precise. Maxim had been briefed days ago, not with accusations, but with facts, folders, contingency plans. All that remained now was to execute. Files are distributed, our statement will go out tomorrow morning, and the firm is in, Maxim added. Good, Ilya said quietly. Let them clean the rot. This wasn't just personal. Dmitri's affair with Victoria had crossed professional boundaries, too. He'd found evidence that Dmitri had attempted to poach ideas from Ilya's digital consultancy, even approached two of Ilya's junior developers under the guise of mentorship. But that wasn't what burned. What burned was the chair in their apartment. The one Victoria used to curl up in with a book, legs tucked underneath her, warm and home. Ilya couldn't look at it anymore. It wasn't a chair now. It was a potential landmine of memory. He didn't want to return to the apartment tonight, so he didn't. Instead, he walked past the glowing windows of late-night cafes, past couples laughing over wine, past the subtle ache of what could have been. And as he walked, he let it settle in. It was done. Not the pain, not yet, but the pretending. The bleeding phase was over. Now came the scarring. A few hours later, Ilya stood in a temporary apartment rented under a corporate account, neutral and untainted. No photos on the walls, no scent of her perfume in the curtains, just a clean space and the low hum of the heater. He poured himself a glass of water. He didn't need alcohol. His clarity didn't need fog to sharpen. He sat at the kitchen counter, laptop open. His inbox was full. Legal updates, financial summaries, digital logs from the private investigator he'd quietly hired 3 weeks ago. The level of detail was exhausting. Timestamps, patterns, coded language. It confirmed something he already knew but hadn't wanted to admit. Victoria hadn't just betrayed him. She'd underestimated him. She'd assumed that because he didn't yell, he didn't feel. That because he didn't monitor her constantly, he wasn't aware. She mistook trust for ignorance and silence for blindness. That was her fatal miscalculation. Ilya opened another window. A new email draft, addressed to the board of Victoria's firm. A brief message, attaching a timeline and selected correspondence. No threats, just a quiet warning. As an investor, I would advise conducting an internal ethics review regarding your senior leadership. Discretion is appreciated, so is action. He hit send. Then another message, this time to a real estate agent he was selling the apartment. No hesitation. He wanted out. Every brick, every spoon, every stain her presence might have left. The next morning, his phone lit up again, this time with a message from Victoria. Leah, please, can we talk? Just once, not about us. Just so I can explain. He stared at the message for a full minute. Then he muted the thread, archived the chat, and powered the phone off. He didn't need closure from her. She'd already delivered it in that hotel room, robe half slipped, eyes full of panic, face turned from guilt to shame when she realized he hadn't come to beg or rage. He'd come to end. At noon, Elias sat in a new cafe in another part of the city, unfamiliar and comforting in its anonymity. The barista smiled as she handed him his espresso. First time here, she asked. He nodded. Feels like it. Then welcome, she grinned. Ilya sat near the window. No laptop, no phone, just him, a warm drink, and a quiet street where nobody knew what he'd just survived. And for the first time in months, he didn't feel like a man unraveling. He felt like a man rebuilding. A week later, the snow came. It was soft, slow, and deliberate. Not the chaotic kind that smothers a city, but the kind that dusts it gently, like nature turning the page. Elias stood outside a small cafe tucked between a bookstore and a florist, the kind of place people stumbled upon and remembered forever. He'd found it 2 days ago and hadn't stopped coming since. Inside, the warmth welcomed him before the coffee did. He was no longer checking messages, no more legal calls, no more surveillance. The folder with the last of the documents had been closed and sent to Maxim with a short note. Do whatever's necessary. I'm finished. Finished, but not broken. He took his usual seat by the window where the world played out like a silent film, people rushing, pausing, embracing, leaving. A man in a suit hailed a cab. A mother adjusted her child's beanie. Life had the audacity to keep going, and somehow, so did he. The barista approached the same girl from the other day. Her name tag read Alina. She had warm eyes, a gap-toothed smile, and a habit of humming when she walked. Your usual? She asked. He nodded, then added, actually, surprise me. Today. She raised an eyebrow, clearly intrigued. Risky move. I'm in the mood for risk. She smiled and walked away, humming softly under her breath. He pulled out a small notebook from his coat, not for business this time, but for something less precise. A list of things he wanted to relearn. How to be still, how to trust slowly, how to laugh without suspicion. On the last line, he had written one word in bold, uneven letters. Live. His phone buzzed once, but he didn't check it. Not anymore. Whatever or whoever it was could wait. He'd spent too long reacting. Now he was choosing. Alina returned with a cup of something that smelled like cinnamon and orange peel. Don't hate it until you try it, she said, placing it down. Then, a pause. You always seem like you're somewhere else. He looked up, surprised. Not in a bad way, she added quickly. Just like someone who used to be part of something big and is still figuring out where he fits now. Elia smiled faintly. That's more accurate than you know. She didn't press him, just nodded and walked back behind the counter, her presence lingering just enough to remind him there are still people in the world who see others without judgment. He took a sip. The drink was strange, sweet, warm, unfamiliar, and somehow exactly what he needed. Outside the window, the snow began to fall heavier, a fresh layer erasing footprints, softening the harsh outlines of the city. A girl passed the cafe window, caught in the wind, her scarf slipping from her neck. Instinctively, Ilya stood, tapped on the glass. She turned, confused. He held up her scarf through the door, and she jogged back, laughing as she took it. Thanks, she said, cheeks flushed. She looked about 30, with curiosity in her eyes. You always this observant? Only when I'm awake, he replied dryly. Her smile widened. Well, stay warm, stranger. She disappeared into the street. Elia returned to his seat and let himself exhale, not the breath of a man escaping, but of someone stepping into air that finally felt breathable again. He didn't know what would happen tomorrow. For the first time in a long time, he was okay with that. Some stories end in fire, others in silence. His ended in freedom and began again in a cafe with a window seat and nothing left to prove.